Welcome to the Success is Subjective podcast series brought to you by collegealternative.org, presented by Lilley Consulting. I'm your host, Joanna Lilley. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of interviewing Jake Tucker. Jake is a licensed clinical professional counselor, an outdoor enthusiast, and a seeker. He is the clinical director of Pulsar, which is a young adult wilderness and adventure therapy program at Blue Fire Wilderness in Idaho. He has worked with children, adolescents, young adults, and their families as a therapist and teacher for the last 17 years. Jake has had the incredible opportunity to take families all over the world on therapeutic adventures and to work with clients in schools, private practice, therapeutic boarding, and in the wilderness. Jake deeply believes in the power of wilderness in the process of healing. Each phase of his life and career has helped shape and prepare him for his role as a wilderness therapist to young adults and their families. These varied experiences have shown Jake that trauma processing, somatic experiencing, and healing the whole family are specific passions in his work as a therapist. Jake shares his journey, which is very inspiring, so there's a lot more to it, but let's not wait any longer. Here's Jake. Jake, I'm really excited to have you on the podcast, so thank you for taking the time to be here.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I feel like we just had kind of a brief conversation about emerging adults not so long ago, obviously, when we were in person at the Alt Fair in California. So I'm actually really looking forward to hearing your story. So again, I just appreciate you being willing to be a guest.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is awesome. Thanks for having me.
So let's just dive in. Why don't you tell the listeners, where did you grow up? And then what was the messaging in which you were receiving from your immediate family, as well as the community in which you were raised about post-secondary education?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Nampa, Idaho, which is about 20 minutes or so from Boise, Idaho. So I still live in Boise. So that's you can kind of see how far I wandered. Although I have wandered a lot in the meantime, but I have landed here for now. And the messaging around secondary education was pretty limited. I mean, not a lot of people in my circle, my family, went to college. My mom was a daycare provider for my whole life. My dad graduated high school but worked kind of at a computer chip manufacturer for most of my life. My number one influence is probably my grandpa, and he got to 8th grade and then joined the military and was an insulator his whole life. So that was kind of it was just not a thing. I was the first person in my family to even think about going to college. I mean, since I've gone, some other people have gone, but it was really in high school, my friends in high school and the community of people I was with or around a lot. They started thinking about college and started thinking about what might happen after high school. And so that was what got me going towards maybe I could try that. Maybe I could do something like that. But high school, there was a lot of struggle for me in those years. And so I really wasn't focused on what was after that. I was just focused on surviving high school. Actually.
That sounds serious. So, I mean, what did you end up doing, right? If you're focused on survival rather than this idea of kind of, exploring a higher level, we talk about higher levels of care. Now we're talking about higher education.
Sure.
So what did you end up doing?
Well, so I did grow up. I think has helped me a lot. I grew up in Nampa. There's a really small liberal arts college that was just one of the main roads of my town drove through the campus. So I would drive as a kid, I would drive through campus and I'd see these college kids crossing the road. And my dad and I would go to basketball games there every once in a while. And, it was just this small liberal arts kind of faith-based college that I didn't know anybody that ever went there, but I always wanted to be one of those college kids crossing the road. I just remember thinking that when I was a kid. So that I think was also, there was some seeds planted. And then a lot of my friends decided to go there because it didn't require a lot of moving or anything like that. But I followed a couple of my friends, and I did actually go to college right out of high school. I went straight to, moved into the dorms and went to, basically at that point, a 4-year university. I didn't even know it would have been a cheaper way to go, but I didn't know what a community college. I didn't even know what those were. That Idaho is not big on those. They are now. We have a couple of them now, but I didn't even think about it. And so anyways, I did go to college, and I struggled mightily to get an idea of what direction I wanted to go in. And I think what helped me was I did struggle academically a lot. I struggled keeping up. Like executive functioning is not something that came easily for me. And so keeping up with school was hard. I was a procrastinator, still am at times, but I was also terrified of disappointing anyone. And so I terrified. Like I did not want to be, sometimes I'll use this with my clients now, but this idea of a spotlight performer. If the spotlight is on me, I will perform. And if it's not on me, I don't. And I wait until I'm like under the gun. And so my high school teachers and my professors, I could not handle at all the idea that they would be disappointed in me. And so that was what kept me up all night long, all-nighters, getting stuff done. But anyways, that's kind of a longer answer than I meant to give for that portion of it. But I went to college, and I landed on a couple different things. And I was like, I like to write, so I'm going to be an English teacher. And then I eventually landed on history, secondary education. I was going to be a high school teacher. So
I know you said, oh, that's a longer answer than I meant to give. You also kind of just like segued into like the struggle existed in high school and it carried over into college, even though you like pursued this 4-year path. And you said like, I didn't really know kind of what I was going to do. And then just identified common struggles that a lot of the young adults that we work with deal with, right? Yeah. You don't come with executive functioning. Sometimes we pull all-nighters. It's like a thing.
Sometimes we do. I don't remember. I can't even tell you how many all-nighters. It was just kind of a constant. It was one of those things where I had always had great intentions, but it was like I couldn't say no to any social gathering, and so everything got pushed to the side until the weekend before, and then I would get it done somehow. If I wasn't so worried about what people thought of me, I think I would have fallen apart for sure, which is an interesting, it was that strong for me. It was like, I can't allow, and that's another thing that, maybe we'll talk about this later, but this shows up in the field a lot, like with my clients, that this terror that someone's going to find out the truth about what's really going on inside of here. I got to present well. I got to act like everything's fine. I got to be a spotlight performer. If you're looking at me, I'm doing well. But if they're not looking at me, the truth is I'm falling apart actually inside. And that's kind of what I lived through. I would say is a lot of secretly falling apart, but outwardly, this guy's got it together.
Well, and I wonder if that actually kind of segues to, like, I was going to ask the question. Obviously, you're not now a secondary, like a high school history teacher. Mm-hmm. I don't know if maybe you were, but I'm kind of curious, like making your way towards graduation, like what did you end up doing?
No, yeah. I was a teacher for a brief period of time. I liked teaching. I do still like teaching a lot. I was, I did some long-term teaching. I did like long-term sub teaching. I did a few different kind of stints as a history teacher. I did my long kind of, everybody that does, gets a teaching degree, you have to do your year-long kind of supported teaching experience as part of graduation. So I did that whole thing. And I really liked the teaching part, but at that point in my life, especially, I could not figure out how to do all the other stuff very well, like grading papers and writing and turning into the various places you have to turn in all of the lesson plans consistently. And I could do it. It was just I was a mess all the time, and I would like stand up and teach and love it. I love the moments when I'm like upping in class and like working with the students, not clients at that point. And, I loved to teach, but it was like, I was a mess, and I was only, at that point I was like 22 or 23 and kind of above my head. It felt like that, at least when I was trying to make that work. And so in the summers, actually kind of going back to college, for 8 summers in a row, all the way through the 4 years of college, and then for 4 years after college. So while I was trying to make teaching work, I worked at camps, like kids camps, for three months in the summer. And so I worked at 3 different camps and absolutely loved it. And I was a counselor. I was like the camp counselor in the cabins with the kids. I was at some points the cook. I cleaned the camp, just kind of did everything to make these camps run. And I thought that's what I was going to do. Actually, I was like, I'm going to get a teaching degree, but really what I'm going to do is become a program director at one of these camps. And it allowed me to bring out my creative side, my silly side. I've always been a little bit of a kind of a goofball, the comic relief in my family when all the tension's there and all the, like, that's kind of who I was. And so camp let me do that. And I'm also kind of, I like to stay busy. Like I sometimes have a hard time slowing down, but I like to say that I like to stay busy. There's, depending on who's making the comment about it. But so on top of those 2 things, the teaching, the camps, in the evening time, I would also do in Idaho. There was it's changed now, but there was a thing called psychosocial rehabilitation, and you basically have various clients from the community, and you work with them 5 to 10 hours a week, one-on-one, and you're outside of school, and you take them into the community. You might take them shopping. You might take them to the coffee shop and just like kind of walk them through what it's like to have these social interactions and do these things. And I had a kid that was, I think my youngest kid was 7 and my oldest was 17. And I fell in love with just being kind of individually helping these clients work their way through life. And then I got to be in the home sometimes. And so it was like 5 years in between graduating with my first degree and deciding to go back and get a counseling degree. But it was those experiences, the camp, and the PSR is what we called it, psychosocial rehabilitation. I was like, this is probably more in line with who I am and how I show up in the world than working in the classroom setting. So then that's what happened. About 5 years later, I went back to grad school and got a marriage and family counseling degree.
So, okay, that's actually kind of cool. I feel like that we don't hear all that often, or at least maybe I'm just being kind of anecdotal with the guests that are on the podcast. If they do go to grad school, it's usually fairly soon after undergrad. You don't have as significant of a gap, but where I'm sitting, that to me feels like you have some lived experiences. You have pretty significant employment and personal history, as well as just maturity, right? By the time you're actually showing up as a graduate student, you know how to be a better student, first and foremost. Right. And then second of all, you just like, you're really, what you're pursuing, why you're pursuing it. So talk a little bit about, you can talk about your grad program if you want to. I'm more interested too in kind of the transition after you got your master's degree.
Yeah. So by the time I decided to go back to grad school, the PSR kind of role I had morphed into working at an elementary school, and it was kind of a tender loving care is what we called it, TLC program. And we kind of had the whole wing of an elementary school where the whole district sent all of their toughest, the most difficult, struggling kids. And we just had 3 classrooms. And that's all we did was work with those clients and get them through elementary school, basically. And it was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. And so it was tough. It was like some of the hardest, most difficult clients I've ever worked with. And at that same time, I was like, this is what I want to do. Something like this is what I want to do. So I'm going to go back to grad school. And so, after I think it was my second semester of my 3rd year of grad school. before I even knew anything like therapeutic boarding schools or wilderness existed. This whole world was not in my consciousness. I was going to be a family counselor. I was going to be I got a kind of advanced degree in couples counseling. I thought, that's what I was going to do. This was going to be like a private practice counselor and specializing in couples and families. And, I was excited to do that. And then I heard about this therapeutic boarding school that was, near where I live. And I mean, relatively near. I definitely drive, and it seemed to me like a combination of everything I like to do at camp, teaching, and therapy. I was like, this sounds perfect. So I was, according to what they were looking for, they happened to be looking for a therapist, and my qualifications were severely lower than what they wanted at that point. I mean, it was just like, we want someone with a doctorate, whatever. And I was like, well, I'm pretty confident this is what I want to do. So, hey, here I am. I'm interested. Talk to me if you want. And maybe someday down the line we can. But so I got hired like a month later, and I worked there for 6 years, and that opened me up to the world that I've been in since. And yeah, I mean, I've also done private practice. On the side, never full time. I've also worked at a recovery program, recovery center. I was clinical supervisor there in Boise for a period of time, but most of the time it's been in therapeutic boarding or wilderness. So we can get maybe deeper into that at some point. But that's what happened after grad school.
Well, and that is a perfect, like, you just set yourself up perfectly to actually talk about, like, what are you doing now? Because you kind of said it, right? Like, all of a sudden you learned about this therapeutic boarding school, and it just kind of opened your eyes from kind of a consciousness perspective of like, oh, there's a much larger world that needs kind of therapeutic support. Or more exciting, honestly, is like you marrying every single thing that you've ever loved, like personally and professionally, leading up to this point. So obviously I'm literally rolling out the red carpet for you right now to talk about what it is that you're doing right now.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting because at this point I work at Blue Fire Wilderness Therapy, and I run the young adult pulsar program. So all the clients we have in this part of the program are 18 to 28-year-olds. And it's interesting because I love it, and I've been doing it for about 3 years, and I was at the boarding school for 6 years, but that was primarily 10 to 15-year-old boys. And so, switching into this young adult world, at first I was like worried, and I don't know about worried, but I was just like, okay, this is gonna be interesting. This will be a challenge. This will be different than what I've been doing. And, I worked with adults in various settings. I worked with lots of parents. And what I found is that it feels like everything I've done up until now has prepared me to be to be ready for working with young adults in this setting and in this way. And it's the level of depth that I can go to with these clients. And I think you kind of mentioned the amount of experiences I've had, both good and bad, just internally and in my own world and in my own process. That's another piece of how I show up in the world. I think is my own personal work is incredible. Like the work I do as a client in various settings is incredibly important for me to be able to show up at all in a healthy way and in a good way for my clients. So it feels like, as I'm talking about what I do, I'm also talking about who I am, because I feel very lucky and blessed to be able to do what I do, because it doesn't feel like work. And I think a lot of us that do this kind of thing, and I'm sure, I imagine this feels similar for you. Like I get paid to do notes. That's how I feel. I get to show up in the field and do that. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, but I think so I want to say this, and then I'm going to actually, just as a reflection, and then I'm going to ask a pretty loaded question, is that I think I really actually appreciate that you just said that, everything that you've talked about up to this point is not so much necessarily highlighting kind of the work that you're doing, although that is what you've described. I think what you've really carefully curated is the growth and development of Jake Tucker, right? Like who you are as a human, showing up with the young adults that you work with right now who are enrolling at Blue Fire, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I always okay, again, here's my soapbox. Selfishly, I like being able to do these podcast interviews because, some folks I do know, some folks I don't, but it gives me an opportunity to really get to know you and like on an even deeper level. But I think that who you are, Jake, like having worked with you before, is that you are kind of the perfect package of, you said you were kind of like the goofy family member. Like that shows up sometimes, right? Like when you talk with me and also I know that you do that too in the field. So that's but that's so important. And then obviously all of those experiences that you've had really have informed you to being kind of in the perfect place that you're supposed to be. Almost like it feels like this is my purpose, right? Like where I am right now, this is my place.
Yeah.
I see it from the outside. That's my reflection to you.
Oh, that's really nice and good to hear. I mean, it's interesting. Yeah, it is my experience of, it feels like my life and the way that I've paid attention enough to know where I need to work on myself and the struggles I've had. I mean, I'm also the kid that basically didn't go to school for half a semester in high school, because I couldn't put my life together. I couldn't feel good. I couldn't get there. And I had to take 12 credits the last semester of my last year of high school just to graduate. But this is a little vulnerable, I guess. But like to me, only like 3 people knew that. That's how good at performing I was. Like my mom knew that, my teachers knew that, and I knew that, and nobody else. And I was like going to morning school and night school, and I was very good at presenting well, and then secretly struggling. And I feel like having to kind of crawl out of that space over not just high school, but through, that struggle absolutely showed up in college and then in the various career paths I've had. And then it's just like having to crawl out of that and really deal with my own stuff in all the various ways. It absolutely shows up in the desert. I do feel like I can help, and that feels good. And I'm still, I still sit in a group every Thursday night, like it's Thursday today. I'm going to my men's group that I sit in, and we sit down and talk about what's really going on. Like, take your mask off and tell me what's real. Like, that's still a very important part of who I am. So yeah, I hope it all shows up in the desert because it's very important to me.
So here's my loaded question. After hearing all of that, right? The vulnerability, the struggles in high school leading to like the journey of where you are now in the desert of Southern Idaho. Do you see yourself as successful?
I knew that question was coming, and I thought about it quite a bit. I mean, what I think I've been successful at is paying really close attention to what I need to work on to show up well in the world. And I feel like that's a work in progress. I feel like there's still times when I'm not showing up the way I want to. I still struggle at times with various things, but I pay attention and I notice that, and I don't ignore it anymore. So that's what I would say I'm successful at. I feel like I'm always striving to be better and to grow and to learn. And I have a kind of, I don't even think, and maybe another area where I've had some success is I think my expectations of myself are actually realistic. And I still, I feel like I've gotten to a place where I know what I'm capable of, and I at least have a better understanding what I think I'm capable of. And it matters to me that I'm working towards that capability. I think that there's not a lot that is more difficult to tolerate than unmet potential, especially when you're aware of it being there. And, I sometimes will talk about like the kind of difficult emotional experience of having an unlived life. And that might be a little deeper than we can go, but I don't want that for myself. I don't want that for my clients. And so yeah, I think I'm successful in that I am paying attention, and I'm always wanting to get better. Like the little bit of dissatisfaction with where I am all the time is really annoying at times, but also, probably what makes me strive. And so I kind of can't hate it.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like it's a motivator.
Yeah.
Okay, so follow-up question to that then. Obviously, you're working with young adults, which this podcast really is geared towards that audience or parents of young adults, especially ones that are looking for just, honestly, empathy, normalization, that life is not linear and it's going to be okay, which obviously you and I are preaching pretty much on a daily basis. But with that in mind, if you could give any piece of advice to a young adult who's struggling right now, right? An example of Jake wearing his mask, right? Second semester, senior year, when you're like, only 3 people knew that I was really, this is what I had to do because I was hiding it so well. What advice would you give to that young person?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it's interesting because I had been thinking about an answer for that, and then you threw in the piece of what of my own experience, and now I'm like, well, what actually would have, what advice would have landed well? I think it's a combination of a couple of things, but my advice is, one, the feeling of isolation and being alone can be so strong, and to know that when you take the mask off, if you were brave enough to reveal to someone else or to somebody's else what's really going on, you're going to find connection, and connection is kind of the way out. I would also say to allow yourself to experience big emotion. I was so worried about, I experience emotion in very big ways in my body and in my mind. And so I was very concerned with like keeping all that in. I don't want it to explode out of me, So that was unrealistic. I can feel big emotion and be okay. And I think that's some of the advice I give consistently to clients now and to anybody that is struggling is allow yourself, get into a situation or find some people that you can trust enough to allow yourself to feel big emotion. I guess the other thing one of the things that I use a lot are one of my heroes is Joseph Campbell. I think I talked to every client I have about Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey. And when it comes to like advice for my clients, the 2 quotes that come to mind from Joseph Campbell are, you have to let go of the life you planned so you can have the one that's waiting for you. And it's like, it's so simple to say and so hard to do, but so profound when you can do it. For parents and for clients, like when I'm thinking of parents that have had to make the decision that wilderness is part of the equation at all. Nobody plans on Blue Fire. Like it's just not part of the plan. It's not part of the kids' plan. It's not part of their plan. And being stuck under a mask isn't part of anybody's plan. Like it's just things happen. And so let go of what you plan, let go of what you think you want, let go of what was supposed to happen, and just take inventory of what really is and let someone see it and realize, notice that people don't run away when you're real. They actually draw closer when you're real. And that's not something that I can say that, but you can't really feel that until you've experienced it. But it is true. And the other Joseph Campbell quote that I really like that fits in here is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So the places you most fear going to, the things you most fear talking about, dealing with, confronting, if you're brave enough to do those things, that's where you're going to find the connection, the treasure, the motivation, the ability that you've been wanting. So that wasn't one piece of advice, was it?
Well, I was going to say 2 fantastic quotes. Honestly, I try to limit it to one piece of advice because if I just left it open-ended, like, what advice would you give? If I asked that question, This podcast would be 5 hours because everybody would just come prepared with all of the advice that they want to pepper out. I think when I ask the question, what's one thing or what ends up being the most important couple things, that's what matters because it's also coming from you, from your heart and your mind. So I appreciate your more than one piece of advice.
Well, maybe I'll try and distill it down. to the person that's sitting there listening to this going, what's the one piece of advice to how to crawl out of my shell? If they can admit they're in one. I remember one conversation I had with one person. It was a friend, but I found that friend and I said, I need to tell you something that I'm ashamed of. I feel terrible about this thing. And I remember sitting on a park bench, looking him in the eye and saying this thing that I was like, he was controlling me, in a lot of ways. And just saying it, just find somebody to say the thing to, whatever the thing is. And my life changed after that, because saying it to one person gave me the courage to say it to a bigger group of people. And then I got to heal, so find somebody to talk to. It's not super profound advice, but it actually is. You can do it. So.
Well, I think so. And yes, it drives the connection in the end, right? And you, kind of going back to your quote about like the cave that you fear is what houses that treasure. So if you are looking, if your treasure is a happy, healthy, fulfilled life, right? Like a healing experience, an opportunity to let go of whatever weight you've been carrying onto for a really long time. You have to say it to one person first before it can start to, like, before you can physically start to feel the relief, which again translates to like you getting that treasure that you want. So I like all of the advice that you're giving. I think it translates to both the young adults and the parents, which is super important to hear that. So I know you said nobody's journey, like nobody goes into their young adult journey thinking that Blue Fire is a part of the plan.
Right.
But for those who have, after listening to your interview, think maybe Blue Fire and working with Jake is a part of my future, how do people connect with you?
Well, there's a website. There's bluefirewilderness.com. There's for the young adult, it's bluefirepulsar.com. We have an admissions team that is happy and waiting for you to call and get that started. If that's something that feels like is the next step, or even is, you want to consider it as a step. I could go into a little bit more about what the process is, but what just came to mind for me was on Tuesday night, we had a graduation for a client that has really left an impact and came in feeling like life was over, essentially, like almost ready for that to happen, actually. And just so proud of him, and he got to such an amazing place. And so it can really be the best first step for crawling your way out of the cave that sometimes we find ourselves in. It's interesting because I just said to enter the cave, and now I'm saying crawl out of the cave. But it can feel it can feel like you're crushed under all these heavy weights and nothing's going to get better. And that's how he felt. And now he's, and he said it so well on Tuesday night. He's like, I came in, I thought I had everything I wanted in my life, and I wanted to die. And I have lost a lot, but I'm so excited to live. And like that to me was really powerful. I guess I'm kind of stuck in that moment, but yeah, if you find yourself like in a stuck place, well, this intervention can really help,
So Jake, thank you. Having worked in wilderness myself, this is like also off script. There are some of those students, right, that we work with that have such profound like insight changes, again, all of a sudden are like really driven for, a different path for themselves. Like it is imprinted on us. And I think it drives us to do the work that we do. But okay, so Jake, I appreciate you giving all of the advice that you have, and for even just kind of sharing a little bit of insight into some of the experiences or takeaways from some current graduates from Blue Fire, Pulsar specifically. So I'm going to say this to you because I say it to all my guests, but I genuinely mean it. Like, I just appreciate you coming on this And I do believe that at least one person, whether it's a young adult or a parent, is going to hear your story and they're going to reach out, whether it's just to express gratitude, like the advice that you're giving, the vulnerability of your story, or just like, actually, I'm interested in kind of connecting with you on a professional level. So with that, I can't thank you enough for being a guest on the podcast. And I do hope, here's my call to action, that whoever is listening to this and really is like, do I reach out to Jake? Do I, please do. So thanks for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. It's been awesome. It's been really fun. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. I want to thank my guests for joining me on this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it wasn't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for the next episode where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guests. And also put a face with a voice by accessing their interview on the newly formed successissubjective.org website. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email me at Joanna, Joanna, at successissubjective.org. I would also be remiss if I didn't tell you to check out the collegealternative.org and lilyconsulting.com websites for additional resources outside of podcasting. If you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please do me a favor and subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to Success is Subjective on any other popular podcast apps such as Amazon, Audible, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. And last but not least, Success is Subjective is listener supported, made possible by me and by you. You can show support for the continuation of this podcast by donating on the successissubjective.org website. Thank you for tuning in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. While information is everywhere, how do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter therapeutic consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.